Hi Kawan, welcome to EDCready. Today we are doing a comparison video between this guy. This is the Benchmade Bugout and this guy. This is the Para 3 Lightweight from Spyderco. So thing about these knives is that I've owned both for a relatively long time. This is like I've owned this guy for almost a year, maybe slightly more. This guy like more than 10 months. So I have kind of a great appreciation for both of them, and I can do this comparison video now. Alright, first things first, what do these knives represent? These knives represent lightweightness. They are knives that are designed primarily for everyday carry. They're not meant to be beater knives going out bushcrafting. They're not meant to be self-defense knives, high-speed, low drag, but what they do excel in, what they're designed for, is being a great knife in the pocket in every day of your life. And hence, they have a few features that are similar. They're both considered lightweight. They both have very not unique, they both have very versatile blade shapes. They're both comfortable in hand. So now I am going to do a full comparison video between these two guys. Starting with the Benchmade Bugout. Now, what is better about the Benchmade Bugout than the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight? The first of it is the blade steel. Now, the standard blade steel is a satin finish S30V. S30V is a really good blade steel. It used to be like among the real premium blade steels out there. It's kind of gone to the high mid-range now, but it's still a really great steel. It will hold its edge really well, and it is very corrosion resistant. Not as corrosion resistant as something like Vanex, but still for everyday use, very corrosion resistant. And then the blade shape of the Benchmade Bugout itself is quite nice. You have a good amount of flat, you have a bit of belly, you have a pointy tip, you have this wedge that gives it that needle point at the end there. And in my case, I have the coating here, which makes it even more corrosion resistant. This is a very middle of the road blade shape. It is not gonna have features like this guy, where it has more of a Warncliffe blade shape, which is great for pull cuts, nor is it going to have a very big amount of belly where you can do a lot of rowing cuts or rolling cuts, but it's going to have a good amount of versatility throughout the whole cutting range. And that really is the benefit of this steel. Now, if you foresee that you are going to be doing a little bit more of a harder use task with your blade, you might want to jump onto the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight. And the reason behind that is that this is a very thin blade and a very tall flat grind, which means that this is going to be a better slicer. However, it is going to be a little bit more brittle. You know, it's not going to be like glass brittle. It's not as brittle as, like, say, Vanex or S90V, but it's still going to be a little bit more brittle than the Para 3 Lightweight. Now, in terms of the blade steel of the Para 3 Lightweight, or the blade of the Para 3 Lightweight, the advantages over the Benchmade Bugout is that this is more of a budget steel, hence why the budget price. This guy comes in at just right around 105 USD, or I think 480 ringgit. And this guy comes at now, the base model, the blue handles with the satin finish, comes in at 131 USD, and this version comes now at 149 US dollars. I'm not sure what the conversion is, but you can expect to find it around 600 to 700 ringgit here in Malaysia. So the blade steel of this guy is called CTS BD1N. It is an upgrade to CTS BD1. And the advantages of this is that this is not only going to be a thicker blade steel, okay, because it is thicker, but it's also going to be a slightly tougher blade steel. And because of that, if you're really looking to beat on your knife a little bit more, I would go with this guy. So in conclusion, if you want slicey, you're going to hold an edge a little bit longer, you go for the S30V in the Benchmade Bugout. But if you want something a little bit tougher, something that has less of a belly, so you can do these kind of pull cuts a little bit better, something a little bit more harder use, you are going to go with this guy. My personal preference, both of these are just perfectly fine. You know, they are going to serve their usage well, and it really comes down to what you need. Now, for me, there are times when I want to be a little bit beatery on my knife. Now, when I'm out in production shoots, I'm going to carry this guy a little bit more. There are some days where I want a little bit of a slicier action, and for that, I want to bring this guy. Now, let's talk about my favorite part of pocket knives, which is the locking mechanism. We have two very popular locking mechanisms here. We have the Benchmade Bugout, which is the patent used to be solely under Benchmade Bugout, but that has now evolved, and now anyone can use the axis lock patent. They just can't call it an axis lock for legal reasons. What this is that you have a sliding bar here, and this sliding bar slides up and down, and then this interacts with the tang or the back of the blade, locking it into position. That's how it works. And you have three moving parts. You have the bar itself, and then you have these two Omega springs back here. Now, the Para 3 lightweight has something called a compression lock. A compression lock is owned, the patent is owned by Spyderco, so they are the only companies that can produce these compression locks. And how it works is that you have a little spring steel here, and then as it opens up, this spring steel would fall into a little cavity in the blade, which will lock up the knife right there. It's a very strong lock, and both of these have very similar characteristics in that to disengage the lock, all you need to do is you can disengage the lock without having your fingers in the path of the blade falling. For example, in a liner lock here, you need to disengage the lock like this. Blade comes towards your hand, move your finger away, and then you can close it. But these guys, you can just, in the compression lock, in the world of the compression lock, you just pinch and then it will close. The Benchmade lock, in the Benchmade axis lock, you just need to pinch, pull back, and it will close. Now, my personal favorite is going to be the compression lock, and the reason behind it is very simple. I've had the Omega springs on my Benchmade Bugout field before. You've seen it on other videos on my channel. Both springs have broken on me after about a few months of fidgeting with it, and that in itself kind of renders this knife a little bit of a disappointment for me, especially for the price you're paying. You do not want your knife locking mechanism to fail on you, which it did. Another smaller reason why I am not such a fan of the axis lock is that it does take a little bit more finger finagling to disengage the lock, rather than having needing to do just a pinch for it to disengage. You need to kind of position your hand in a certain way. They need to pinch and then pull back, and then it will drop. Now, the advantage of a Benchmade axis lock is that, number one, it is completely ambidextrous. It doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you are, whether you're left-handed, right-handed, or whether you are ambidextrous. It's the same action. You just pinch, pull back, and it will drop. And once you flip the clip around, it'll be an exact same experience for a lefty as it is for a righty. Compression lock, I would say it is about 90% ambidextrous, because you need to pinch here, and then once you switch over to your left hand, you need to pinch with a different finger, but it can definitely be done. However, the advantage of the compression lock is that it has never failed on me. It is a much simpler lock. The only moving part of the lock is the actual spring bar itself. Nothing else moves when it comes to the lock, and I like simplicity and I like durability, and the compression lock to me is a more durable locking mechanism. Let's move back a little bit. Let's talk about hardware. We have a lot of hardware to take this guy apart. The screws are nice and deep, and same goes with the Benchmade Bugout. The screws are nice and deep. You have T10 here, T6, T8, and T8. On the Benchmade Bugout, you have T10 and T6, T6, T6. That being said, it's actually very difficult to completely disassemble and put back together a Benchmade Bugout because of those Omega springs in that axis lock. This guy, a little bit, it's not the most straightforward knife to take apart, because you're kind of like going back and forth, because some screws you can only access from one side. Like this guy, you can't unscrew it here. This guy, you can't unscrew it here. So you're kind of going a little back and forth, jumping between Torx bits to take it apart. But this is just a little bit easier and a little bit faster to take apart, clean, put back together. This guy, once you know that little trick of disassembling it and then pressing this pivot out using another Torx bit, then it kind of gets a little bit easier. But again, the Benchmade Bugout, just a little bit more finagling than you need to disassemble it compared to the Para 3 lightweight. So there's a win for the Para 3. Next up, let's talk about the handle and the ergonomics. Now, they're both using some kind of injection mold plastic. This is FRN, this is their Grivery handles. Okay, and the great thing about plastic handles, and why it is one of my favorites, if not my favorite handle material, is that you can really form it to any shape that you want. And I love this texturing. You have some nice matte finish here. The corners are perfectly rounded here. You have this nice like volcano texturing. and it just locks in hand very nicely. The groovy handles has a little bit more texturing, like it is not completely smooth like you see on the edges of the Benchmade Bugout. It's not completely smooth, and you have the same aspect of rounded corners here. So that's very nice handles. Both of them, however, do have the same problem when it comes to every injection molded plastic handles, which is that the inside of the scales are quite sharp. Like here it can get a little bit uncomfortable, and here is also a little bit sharp. So that's a little unfortunate. Now let's talk about ergonomics. Ergonomics are, in my opinion, like the most subjective of all the categories I'm going to talk about here right now. The Benchmade Bugout is going to fit more hands better. The Benchmade Bugout is going to fit more hands better because, as you can see here, it doesn't have as many finger grooves as you see than with the Para 3 Lightweight. And as a result, it has a very neutral kind of ergonomic where my small hands can fit here, medium and large hands can still fit here. It doesn't really force your hands to go in a particular location. You're kind of comfortably-ish in every position, and because of that, it is a very ergonomically versatile knife. Whereas this guy, your hands kind of just really need to fall into a certain position. Now granted, if it does fall into that position, it is an extremely comfortable knife, and Spyderco really knows how to do their ergonomics. For me, I do have a smaller knife. I would reckon, for me, it does fit very comfortably in my hand. This is the second most comfortable knife I own. And I can imagine that if my hands were a little bit bigger, it would actually be even more comfortable in my hand. So ergonomics, personally for me, I would go with the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight. If I have slightly bigger hands, I would think I would enjoy this a little bit more. However, if you like the more neutral grip handles, grip ergonomics, where, you know, with this knife you're really kind of forced or encouraged to hold it in a certain way, in a certain ergonomic stance. Whereas this guy, you have a lot more freedom in movement. You can have it a little bit further forward, you can have it a little bit further back, and it's kind of feel pretty much the same all the way around. But for me, with my hands, ergonomics on this guy goes to this guy. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, and it's a very important topic, is that ergonomics is great, cutting performance is great, carryability also a very important topic, because these guys are meant to be everyday lightweight carries. So it's going to be all about how easy is it to carry in your pocket. Now both of these have very great features. Both of these are relatively thin, one more so than the other. Both of these are very light, one more so than the other. And both of these have deep carry pocket clips that can really hide a majority, like 99.9% of the knife in the seam of your pocket. That being said, the Benchmade Bugout to me and its smaller cousin, the Mini Bugout, are the most amazing carry knives in the pocket. Like, I kid you not, like having this in the pocket really feels like there's no pocket knife in your pocket. Whereas with this guy, it's not bad. It still carries really well because it is lightweight and it is canted quite nicely. Surprisingly, this hump is not really noticeable because it kind of hides in the corner of your pocket, and you don't really feel the bulk or the weight of this guy. But the Benchmade Bugout just takes it to a whole nother level of carryability. Now, if you're a lanyard hole guy, the lanyard hole on the Benchmade Bugout is definitely bigger, so you can fit a larger lanyard if that's what you want. Para 3 Lightweight, it has a lanyard hole. I mean, it's just a standard lanyard hole. I'm not a big fan of lanyards, but just keep that in mind. And I think the lanyard hole on the Benchmade Bugout looks a lot more attractive than the Para 3 Lightweight. It's really like designed to have an aesthetic appeal with the knife. Last but not least, let's talk about the aesthetic appeal of these knives. I would consider it a draw. I do like the Ranger green, and then the coating that you have here. It does look very nice, very greyman. But there's something about the finish on the FRN of the Para 3 Lightweight that I really like. Okay, so in conclusion, which one do I prefer? Well, I gotta come back to the whole, like, what do these knives cost? 105 and 150 for this model, 131 for the regular blue with the satin blade. And for that price, I would go with the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight. And here's the reason why. Number one, the blade stock is a little bit thicker, so I do not really feel that bad about beating on this guy a little bit. This guy is definitely a better slicer, but this guy still slices pretty good. It's not going to be like super nice to slice a bunch of cardboard with compared to the Bugout, but I just know that if I kind of run into a stapler or I need to cut something on a chopping board, I know that this is just going to be just a little bit more hardy than this guy. Granted, I might need to sharpen it up or strap it up a bit more, but I think if I'm only going to choose one knife, I would choose this guy over this guy. Next up, I much prefer the locking mechanism here. It's much more much easier to maintain and much easier to use because it only has one moving part. And actually there's one final factor which I forgot to talk about, which is the pivot. This guy has steel liners, but they only go up to here, so you only get about a square inch of steel liners on each side. And then you have, on both sides, you have phosphor bronze washers. And what that means is that the actual action is a little bit more consistent, and then the centering is actually a little bit better as well. Whereas on the Para 3 lightweight, for some absurd reason, you only have liners on one side, you have only washers on one side, so the other side is running up against plastic. And although you can still very much get a drop shut action without any blade play, you are going to sacrifice a little bit of a centering issue. Like this guy, yeah, never gonna ever get centered in my experience. Now, they have a knife that's very similar to this that has washers on both sides, that centers perfectly and has a great drop shot action, which is the Sage 5 lightweight. So I do not know why they couldn't do that here. I don't know, maybe it's a pricing issue, but I don't know, I don't know why they didn't do that here. That being said, the rest of the knife compensates. The compression lock compensates for the pivot issue. The two washers here does not compensate for the shortcomings of the axis lock. I prefer the ergonomics on the Para 3 lightweight a little bit more, but I prefer the pocket carry of the Benchmade Bugout. So in conclusion, I prefer the Spyderco lightweight. Now, my conclusion does not have to follow yours. If you're the kind of person that likes lightweight more than anything else, you love very thin handles, you love very neutral ergonomics, and you love great carry and a much better blade steel, go with the Benchmade Bugout. There is nothing wrong with it. It is still one of the greats in terms of everyday carry pocket knives out there. Okay guys, that is my conclusion. Thanks, and as always, stay ready.